Good afternoon now, ladies and gentlemen. If I could please have your attention and ask that you find your cell phones once again and make sure that they're turned to silent or vibrate or stun, that'd be greatly appreciated. Dr. Harold Baumgarten, or Dr. Hal as he's affectionately referred to around here at the museum, has been a part of this institution since the day we opened our doors back on June 6, 2000, 13 years ago today. He's a distinguished veteran of the 29th Infantry Division, 116th Regiment, and he's the recipient of Bronze Star, Purple Heart, and the French Legion of Honor. I had the pleasure of really getting to know Dr. Hal in 2005 when we were on one of the museum's Normandy Tours, and I had the distinct honor to stand with him on Omaha Beach at Vierzeville-sur-Mer, where he landed on June 6, 1944, and hear his story that he's about to share with you all. One of the things that caught my attention while we were at the beach and Dr. Hal was talking was all the activity that was going on at Vierzeville. You had children running around playing with the sand or kicking soccer balls. You had teenagers that were on blankets canoodling and doing what teenagers may be doing. You had fishermen driving their trucks and boats down to the beach, and you had people running their horses up and down the beach. And to me and some of the other guests, it came off as a bit odd and quite disrespectful, actually, thinking that here is bloody Omaha that we Americans know it as. But we asked, somebody asked Dr. Hal, and he said, they asked him, what do you think of this? And he said, well, this is what we were here for. This is why we came, so these people could live their lives. It reminded me of a quote from our founder of the museum that I'd like to read to you. Dr. Stephen Ambrose said, America sent her best and brightest to the beaches of Normandy, Sicily, Iwo Jima, and many other battlefields, oceans away from her shores. The American sailors, soldiers, and airmen came not to conquer, but to liberate, not to loot or destroy, but to bring life and freedom. We have one of those men, one of the greatest generation here with us. We've got many others in the audience, but behind each one of those men, as the cliche goes, there's an even greater woman behind him. And I'd like to acknowledge his wife of 64 years this past Tuesday. Rita, if you could please stand up. As you are about to hear from Dr. Hal, he's got one of, if not the most vivid memories of his experiences from the whole war, not just on June 6th. He remembers every name and every face that he encountered. And I credit Rita to a lot of this. She encourages him to be active. She encourages him to share his story. And it is now my pleasure and privilege to welcome Dr. Harold Baumgarten to share his story. Dr. Hal?
I'm not used to such a great introduction. My wife makes me take the garbage out at home. But I'm going to speak today about the invasion of Normandy, France on June 6, 1944, D-Day. And I'm going to limit my talk mainly to Omaha Beach, one of the two U.S. invasion beaches. Omaha Beach is on the northern coast of Normandy, France, running 4.5 miles long, going from west to east, and 300 yards wide at low tide. At high tide, there's no beach at all. Now, the Allied Command divided Omaha Beach into 13 sections for different units to land, and the Germans in January 1944 set Erwin Rommel in charge of the defenses of Western Europe. And he toured the so-called Atlantic Wall from Norway down to the border of France with Spain, and he was very disappointed because his strategy they knew an invasion was coming. His strategy was to not let any invading soldier reach dry land. They must be destroyed in the water, on the beaches. So he bucked up all these pillboxes on the beaches. He put in more gun emplacements. He had his men put in 6 million more landmines and 4 rows of diabolical obstacles. These obstacles started at the low tide mark and went from 50-yard intervals till they reached half the width of the beach. I'm going to limit my talk today to the Door Green sector, which was a sector on the westernmost part of Omaha Beach. My reasons are threefold. One, it was the smallest but most heavily defended of all the beaches. It also was portrayed in 2 motion pictures, The Longest Day and Saving Private Ryan. And the third reason, I was there. Now, if you were standing at low tide on Door Green sector before any of the battle took place, you would see these 4 rows in front of you of obstacles. I'm not going to get into naming these things, but they took up half the beach. They were barbed wired and mined. And then if you looked off into the distance, you would see the only partial cover on that beach for an invading soldier was a 25-foot cement seawall, which was 300 yards away. Picture 3 football fields that a soldier had to cross to get to the only partial cover on that beach. It was, the wall is no longer as long as it was on D-Day, but on D-Day it covered the entire length of the beach, and it had concertina barbed wire on the top of it and mines. And looming up from that wall was a 100-foot bluff covered by the greenery of summer. Now, in other words, as you're looking at this from low tide mark, you're seeing what amounts to almost the height of a 5-story building. Now, built into the bluff itself, a little above the wall, was 3 huge pillboxes, not the kind you keep pills in, but thick-walled cement pillboxes, which made them impervious to air and sea power. So the armament of these, due to General Rommel, he made sure that all the fire from their pillboxes and trenches were enfilading, which means they crisscrossed. Every square inch of that beach was covered with the area that I'm mentioning, the pillboxes. There were 2 MG-42 machine guns and a 20-millimeter gun on a swivel. Now, 30 feet above these pillboxes, the Germans had cut zigzag trenches into the bluff itself, connected to a cocoon of underground tunnels. Now, in these trenches, they had 3 MG-42 machine guns. I believe I saw one over there. And many riflemen, some with telescopic sights. Altogether, they had 450 soldiers guarding Door Green sector. They were only supposed to have 250, but General Rommel made sure there were 200 more. Now, this machine gun that I keep mentioning was considered the fastest gun in the world at the time. It fired 1,500 bullets per minute. Now, the soldiers landing on Door Green sector were going to face 5 of these monsters that were crisscrossing at 1,500 bullets a minute. Now, the town, before I mention the town, there was one more weapon up on the bluff there were cement emplacements called Tobruk's, from which they were going to fire 105mm mortar shells down on the beach. The town at the top of the bluff, or near the top of the bluff, was called Vierville-sur-Mer. And Jeremy told me that the museum had a tour on that beach 6:35 this morning for D-Day. That town was a resort village, and that was guarded by a 30-foot-high pillbox with another MG machine gun. Now, if you went north down the hill towards the beach from Vierville on a very strategic, valuable road that the Allies needed, it was called Dog 1 or D1. When you got down the bottom of the road, the Germans had built 2 8.5-foot cement walls, each 6 foot thick, blocking the entrance from the beach to that road. Now, that road was very important. We had to get that road to get artillery up and supplies and tanks and even soldiers. Now, if you went south from the town of Vierville-sur-Mer, 3 miles south, you'd find the German artillery. 4 huge 88mm cannons in cement emplacements, all zeroed in on the beach below, on Dog Green sector. But just to make their fire more accurate, they had forward observers in the steeple of the church in town and in the trenches on the face of the bluff. Now, these obstacles that I mentioned before, the 4 rows of obstacles, all barbed wired in mind, they were only visible at low tide. The invasion had to take place at low tide so the soldiers could see the obstacles and try to avoid them. So low tide in Normandy on D-Day was 6:30 a.m. So the invasion or H hour had to be 6:30. Now, if we take a cruise 11 miles north in the English Channel to where the HMS Javelin was anchored at 3:30 in the morning on D-Day, this ship was a British transport that held the men that were picked to invade this fortress that I just mentioned to you. They were the men of Company A, B, C, and D of the 116th Regiment of the 29th Division. They were young, they were well-trained, well-disciplined, best-equipped soldiers of that time, and very patriotic. Now, later on in writings that occurred after D-Day, they were called the Suicide Wave. Now, when I say young, I mean average age 24, with a great preponderance of teenagers like myself. The average height and weight will astound you, but in World War II, they were 5'7" and 147 pounds. Now, in the first week of May 1944, we were issued new equipment just for first waivers. They burnt our old equipment in a bonfire, and I'm going to describe the major part of this equipment, the most important. We had, of course, gas-impregnated shoes and uniforms because we expected the Germans might use gas. A very fancy little gas mask was invented for D-Day in a black rubber bag, and it was worn on the upper chest. The life preserver was issued to us, and this was worn under the arms and clipped over the gas mask under the chin, blown up with a twin balloon, blown up by carbon dioxide capsules. Now, a special combat jacket was issued. This was made of a dark green canvas material. It had no sleeves. It went down to mid-thigh. It had grommets around the waist. Some of the soldiers clipped their hand grenades in there. And it was closed and opened by means of two straps, like the straps on the back of a baseball cap, only 5 times as wide. And it was difficult to open and close even when dry. Now the purpose of this jacket, it had 4 pockets in the front and 2 large pockets in the back. So it was supposed to take the place of the usual Army packs. But it was never used again by the United States Army after D-Day for reasons that will become clear to you. Special seasick pills were issued. They were little maroon capsules which later became Dramamine, which I'm sure a lot of you have seen in your drugstores. 3 barf bags were issued to each soldier. They didn't always hit these barf bags. A pliaform white bag, a waterproof bag, was issued to carry the weapons, to prevent the spray of the English Channel from wetting the weapons. I put a rubber condom on the tip of my rifle, which worked just as well. A special lubricant was used, a white creamy material invented by the British scientists to keep the French sand from fouling up the moving parts of the weapons. It was called lubriplate. But the most revolutionary piece of equipment issued on D-Day was the first aid kit. The first aid kit, besides having just bandages in it and sulfadiazine powder and sulfur tablets, it contained a surette, a miniature-like toothpaste tube, which had a built-in hypodermic needle. And this contained 1 grain or 1 grain of morphine sulfate, or 60 milligrams, which was a narcotic. Now this narcotic saved a lot of lives on D-Day because the leading cause of death in a wounded soldier is shock, and the morphine tended to relieve the pain and reduce the shock. But the Army after D-Day decided that the soldiers shouldn't carry their own morphine for fear of drug abuse. Now, this was ludicrous because in World War II, soldiers weren't interested in drugs. They were interested in women. Now, we were each allowed to choose our own ammunition. I chose 2 bandoliers of mostly black-tip, armor-piercing ammunition. 2 bandoliers amounted to 96 extra rounds or bullets. I carried 3 hand grenades. Now, all this armament, your machine gun, your rifle, weighed well in excess of 100 pounds. So some of these guys only weighed 125 pounds. They were going to have to carry their own weight standing up for 3 hours in a tiny assault boat, crowded in, no seats, no head coverings, carrying almost their own weight from 3:30 in the morning till the 6:30 rendezvous on Omaha Beach. The little boats we used, unfortunately, were not Higgins boats like that one with the high sides. They put us in British boats, which were called LCAs. They were trying to copy the U.S. Higgins boat. It was London-Croft Assault. It held 29 men and 1 officer. And so there were 6 boats to each company. So if your math is with me, that's 180 men and 6 boats. But we had 4 companies. So there were 24 boats and there were 720 men. Now, we had the manpower then because I mentioned 450 for the Germans. And our training from this same British troop ship was a picnic compared to D-Day because we went down cargo nets during 2 maneuvers, Fox 1 and Fox 2. The English Channel was calm, the sunlight was out, and we had a pleasant cruise to a beach in southwest England called Slapton Sands Beach, which had the same topography as Normandy. It had the cliffs and everything. The British sailors landed us almost completely dry, but we attacked pillboxes that were on the beach itself, not elevated like in Normandy, up 30 feet. So even though we lost 26 men on Fox 2 due to the live fire that we used, it was a picnic compared to D-Day. D-Day was pitch black on our ship at 3:30 in the morning. The winds were 5 miles an hour. The temperature was 50 degrees Fahrenheit, but the waves were 10 to 15 feet high. So we couldn't go down our cargo nets. We had to get into our boats by getting over the railing on the ship, took our assigned seats in the boat, and were lowered away by means of ropes and davits. When the little boats hit the water, they were thrown around like matchsticks. Every man was immediately soaked with the English Channel water, icy water. And the boats, not being Higgins boats, they had sides about like this, they filled up with water. And in order to stay afloat, we had to take off our steel helmets and bail out the water and the vomiters from the people that were missing their barf bags. So this went on for 3 hours, and our feet were frozen. Some of the guys were so sick, they were laying in the water on the floor. And now Hitler took his usual sleeping pill. He didn't wake up till 2 in the afternoon. That turned out to be very fortunate. General Erwin Rommel said no idiot will attack in this weather. The weather was very bad. And he went back to Germany for his wife's birthday, which happened to be June 6th. And he brought her a pair of French shoes. Now, what about the armament in our little boats? We had each boat had twice the armament of a usual Army squad. We had 5 riflemen, 2 automatic weapons, 2 60-millimeter mortars, 2 bazookas, demolitions, Bangalore torpedoes to blow wire, and a flamethrower. Now the Company D 6 boats had heavy weapons, water-cooled machine guns and 80-millimeter mortars. And we had, for you sailors, we had the battleship Texas assigned to Dog Green Sector. You can see the importance of Dog Green Sector to the Allied command. And I figured out over the years why they gave us so much armament. We were the closest big beach landing to Pontefract, where the Rangers were going to go up 90 feet and not carry much ammunition and not carry much food. So we were supposed to rescue them. So Battleship Texas, unfortunately, though, had to stay out 12 miles because of the huge coastal guns. The Germans could have blasted the ship out of the water. So they were going to fire and shell. They were going to shell Dog Green Sector for a period of a half hour, from 5:55 to 6:25. And unfortunately, with the darkness and the rough seas, they fired over the beach and did no harm to the German defenses. Now, to those of you that are familiar with the Pacific War, you know that when the Marines were landing on a beach in the South Pacific, the Navy shelled those beaches for 2 to 3 days. Why only a half hour in France? Because we needed the element of surprise. If the Germans knew exactly where we were landing, they could have thrown the 2 U.S. divisions of Omaha Beach, the 1st Infantry and the 29th, into the English Channel. So you notice we weren't getting much support so far. The Navy also fitted out an LCI barge with 1,000 rocket launchers. They were going to fire 4,000 5-inch rockets at Door Green Sector. Sounds great, doesn't it? They looked like a flock of birds from us in our assault boats. Going towards the beach, we thought they would destroy all the guns, but they landed harmlessly in the water. The Navy also provided underwater demolition men, the progenitors of the SEALs. They were wearing Army uniforms. The only way I could identify them, they had a white convex stripe on their helmets. They came in rubber boats. They were delayed because of the rough seas, and when they landed, they were only partially successful. They were going to blow 2 50-yard paths through the obstacles on the beach. But they were getting wounded and killed by the Germans, so they were only partially successful. Now, we had one other weapon given to us. They had amphibious tanks. 32 of them were assigned to Omaha Beach. They had dual drive propellers in the back. They had canvas rubberized sides with pneumatic tubes running in them, and this enabled them to swim. Now at Slapton Sands, they swam from 6,000 yards out, got up on the beach, and lowered their sides. They were going to do the same on Door Green Sector, but they were never tested in rough seas. So 14 of them out of the 16 that were given to us, we were given half those tanks available for Omaha Beach. Their sides were smashed by the rough seas, and 14 of them drowned, most of them with their men in them. So only 2 tanks reached Door Green Sector. Now, had the 16 reached the beach, they could have lowered their sides. The Germans would have been faced with 16 75mm cannons and machine guns at point-blank range. But only 2 tanks reached Door Green Sector, and the one on the left was destroyed immediately by those huge 88mm cannons. The other tank was still firing when I landed. Now, we had one other offensive weapon in our favor. 450 bombers, B-25s, came over from England, from the 8th Army Air Corps, and they were going to drop 12,000 tons of bombs on Omaha Beach. They promised us man-made foxholes, which we never got, because as they came over at right angles to the beach, they were trying to site their bomb sites, their northern bomb sites, and the cloud cover was so bad due to the poor weather that they were afraid to hit the ships in the harbor or the troops coming in. So they delayed their drop for 3 seconds. 1001, 1002, 1003, and by the time they released their bombs, they landed 7 miles south of Omaha Beach and killed Norman cows and chickens. So our support, you can see our support was negligible. Now, what happened to the troops coming in? We found out that we couldn't land 24 boats abreast of each other, not even 12 boats, but we had to come in 6 boats at a time. So we came in sequence, A, B, D, and C. Now, there was also one other hazard. There was a swift current along the Normandy coast coming from west to east. Now, Company C, in the darkness and the mist, got caught in this current and got swept a mile to the east. Now, they were very lucky, though. They crossed the beach, they got up the bluff, and they were intact except for one casualty, a fellow named Ray Shura of Kenilworth, New Jersey. He's still alive, but he limps. He got shot in the ankle. Company D, with its heavy weapons, got swept 200 yards to the east. And they weren't that lucky. They lost 38 men killed and many wounded, including their commander, who was Walter O. Schilling, Jr. Only Company A and B were coming in on target. On target was the white steeple of the church on the top of the bluff in Ville-sur-Mer. Now, Company A, though, lost 3 boats to drowning. Company B had only 4 boats left. So there were 7 boats coming in on target. But one of the Company B boats hit a mine and blew up. And we were showered with wood, metal, and body parts, and of course, blood. The British sailors, who were young people like myself, became frightened. I don't blame them. They saw more mines in the water. They dropped their ramps prematurely. So instead of being dropped on the beach at low tide, we were dropped in deeper water. When the ramps went down, was a signal for every weapon on that beach. Those 5 machine guns that I mentioned, 1,500 bullets a minute. The boat commanders of the companies were killed. All the junior officers were killed. All these, except for one second lieutenant. All these sergeants were killed except for 2. So all we had left, if your math is with me, if we only had 6 boats, that would be 180 men to face the 450 on the bluff. Now, the lieutenant in my boat was First Lieutenant Harold Donaldson of Texas. He got killed in the boat. The man in front of me, carrying a Browning automatic rifle, was killed on the ramp, gunned down. It was Clarice Riggs of Pennsylvania. And I dove in behind him, and there I was standing in neck-deep, bloody water with my rifle over my head. Now, believe it or not, I was 5'10" on D-Day and weighed 185 pounds plus. Now, usually when I get interviewed on local television in Jacksonville, they ask me how come I shrunk. And I always say to them, tongue-in-cheek, it's Rita's coffee. So she was getting calls from all her friends, what was in the coffee. But I looked around to see what was going on around me, and these fellas that were 5'5", 5'6", 5'7", wearing these canvas jackets, which when soaked, pulled them down more, and with their 100 pounds of weight, the life preserver wasn't of any value to them. So most of them drowned. They went straight down to the bottom. Those that bounced up and down trying to get the equipment off were picked off by those fellows with the telescopic sights. So you can see we were being wiped out. I didn't wear that jacket on D-Day because my best buddy in the boat, Robert Garbett Jr. of Newport News, Virginia, said to me back in England, said, Hal, don't wear that jacket, it's going to drown you. So I listened to him. And the reason I listened to him, he was an old man. He was 25 years old. I was only 19. But I had seen the newsreels of the German soldiers marching into Holland, Belgium, and France, and they made defenseless Jewish people wear Stars of David on their clothing so they could identify them. So I took my ever-sharp ink pen and drew a big Star of David on the back of my field jacket and put the Bronx, New York underneath it. And they would have no difficulty identifying me. But I had an M1 Garand rifle. Now, as we started to move in, those of us that were still alive, with our rifles across our chest at Port Arms, first through water, then damp sand, and we went to the right of the tank that was still firing. I saw things on that beach that no 19-year-old should ever have to see. Men with their guts hanging out, yelling for their mothers, body parts strewn all over the beach, men that were carrying flamethrowers. Their fuel tanks were hit, and they were being cremated. So we had the smell of burning flesh in the air. When we got to 140 yards from that seawall, while we were running, we saw people being blown up by landmines going up in the air and parts going all over the place. But when we got to 140 yards from the seawall, a machine gun spray came from the trenches from right to left. And I heard a loud thud on my right, and my rifle vibrated. I turned it over. There was a clean hole in its receiver section. My 7 bullets in the magazine section had saved my life, because there was another thud on this side, and that soldier was gone. I hit the sand behind the last row of obstacles, the hedgehogs, which were to block tanks. They were 3 steel rails welded together and standing about 5 foot high. And I observed to my right, 19-year-old Private Robert Dittmar of Fairfield, Connecticut, had been hit in the chest. He went forward due to his momentum. He tripped over the hedgehog and was lying on his back, looking skyward, yelling, I'm hit, Ma, Mother. And then he was silent. I looked over to my left, and staggering by me, without his helmet, a gaping hole in the left side of his head, was Sergeant Clarence Robeson of Lynchburg, Virginia. You notice I don't forget to mention their names. Nobody will ever know what they did if I don't mention their names, where they were from. I yelled for him to get down. His blonde hair was streaked with blood. He staggered all the way behind me to the left. And he knelt down facing the wall and started praying with his rosary beads. And the machine gun up on my right in the trenches fired over my head and cut him in half. But I mean really cut him in half. We had 85% casualties in the first 15 minutes. Only 2 of us survived my boat team of 30. I was wounded 3 times on June 6th and twice on June 7th. 3 of those wounds were life-threatening. Now you might say, what kind of a nut was this? Why wasn't he medevaced out? We didn't have medevac on D-Day. And General Bradley out on the cruiser Augusta in the harbor found out about the slaughter on Dog Green sector. And he decided no reinforcements will be coming in from the 115th Regiment at 10 a.m. He sent them further to the east. So we were left with options. Stay on the beach and die, surrender the beach to the Germans. Surrender is not a word in the 29th Division dictionary. So most of us fought wounded. Now, what I call the miracle of Dog Green sector. I mentioned to you there were 450 guys there with 5 machine guns and 2 cannons and 105 millimeter mortars. What I called a miracle, by 12 midnight, every gun was silent on that beach. The Germans either were killed, captured, or ran. But in the bright moonlight of D-Day, which they needed for the paratroopers, the beach looked like it was painted with a giant bright red brush, and the beach was covered with dead 29ers and some Rangers. And for the rest of the story, I'd like you to read my book, D-Day Survivor, which is in the bookstore here. All the proceeds go to the museum. I get nothing. And now I'm open to questions. Thank you. Any questions? Yes. Exactly 40 minutes.
In relation to where the 29th
Yeah.
Division landed, where did the Big Red 1 land on
Oh,
Omaha?
I meant to mention that. The eastern part of Omaha Beach was 1st Division country. The western part, which turned out to be the worst part of the beach, was the 29th Division area. Questions?
Dr. Baumgarten, thank you so much for your story and for what you did. I wanted to ask about the life preservers that were issued. I've understood that many of the guys wore them so low that they were completely ineffective, and in effect they were turned over. Did that occur?
Right, up in the museum, usually when I see pictures, they show the life preserver around the waist. We wore them under the arms and clipped under the chin to keep the neck afloat. But they were still not capable of carrying all that weight, and that wet jacket with the rations in it and whatever equipment they were carrying just dragged them down to the bottom. So I still think it was a miracle that we took that beach.
Dr. Hal, a question here from one of our volunteer veterans.
J.J. Whitmire, D-Day veteran, Utah Beach. I was interested in asking your rank, sir.
My rank?
Yes.
I was private.
Thank you.
With 2 years ROTC and 2 years of college. That's the way the Army runs. Interesting thing about Utah Beach. When the airplanes came in to bomb Utah Beach, they came in parallel to the beach. They didn't come in at right angles. They were very successful. And the 4th Division lost more men in training than they lost on Utah Beach on D-Day.
Dr. Hal, do you feel painting the Star of David on your jacket had any influence on the Nazis trying to kill you?
No, I don't think so. They never got around to killing. One of them had his arm on me. I was laying wounded in a ditch, and they were looking, a patrol was coming down the beach, and they were looking for cigarettes. They didn't get any on me. But he said to me, "Don't worry, Yankee soldier." I think my star was covered with blood, though, because I had been, by that time, that was wound number 4. And wound number 2 bled all over me from my head and down my cheek.
Another question from another veteran.
Fred Krieger, gunner's mate, USS Augusta.
So
where were you on the 3rd day?
On what?
The 3rd day?
The 3rd day, D+3.
The 3rd day, I was on LST 291 on June 8th. I was evacuated June 7th from St. Mary Circus. The 3rd day, I was on LST 291.
291.
Courtesy of the United States Navy.
That's the day of the storm that hit.
Oh.
You remember that?
Of what?
The storm that hit the beach.
Oh, no, I didn't get caught in the storm.
That's the storm that did a lot of damage.
But the LST had hit a mine, though. So we had to limp back to England. We didn't get back till June 11th.
Well, I'm sorry we were out where we were and couldn't get to help you on that.
Dr. Baumgarten, thank you so much for your service and what you did for the country and for me and all of us.
Thank you.
I would like to ask you, as you were getting off the boat, and you mentioned that the officers were shot down and the man in front of you was shot down, how did you find the courage to go on?
Well, training was tremendous. We had a job to do. We each knew what we were supposed to do, and we did it. I didn't mention the rest of the story is in the book, but my best buddy there, Robert Garbett Jr., when I got to the rendezvous at Dog 1, that road going down, He was laying face down in the sand. A sniper had put a bullet in his head. He was 5'8", but he reached that wall before I did.
Are there any other questions? One last one.
Could you describe or explain the medals that you have on your chest today?
I don't have all of them, but I got, this one is the French Knight of the Legion of Honor, given to me by one of the older French presidents. I got 2 Bronze Stars here, Purple Heart. Underneath I got the Croix de Guerre. The rest of these are European theater with Arrowhead for the beach and Battle Star. And I don't see anything else that's significant.
They're all significant, is what the gentleman said. That's a great note to end on.
Exactly.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Dr. Hal. Thank you for a wonderful presentation. It's a perfect mix of history lecture and personal account that is pretty rare to find these days. So thank you for sharing your story. As Dr. Hal mentioned, you can read the rest of the story in the book. He and Rita are both very proud that they have all of their proceeds from the sales go directly back to the museum. Hal will be following me to the main museum store where he will gladly continue conversations and sign any copies of the books that he has. But again, thank you, Dr. Hal. Thank you, Rita. Thank you to all the World War II veterans in the crowd. And thank you all for being here. Have a great afternoon.